like that report says, it was a collective failure, and it's extremely sad to see that everything that we worked very hard for, thousands of sacrifices made, and this is what it amounts to. I would say that it's not that we didn't predict or warned our international allies about, and I'm glad that the Taliban do not have the legitimacy so that the world is still paying attention to Afghanistan. And
you talk about collective, you talk about the allies. What about your own personal responsibility?
I am as responsible as every other person there is in our government. We were all responsible, and I think it's going to weigh on us for the rest of our lives.
How surprised are you how quickly things have gone backwards?
Not surprised at all, in fact. While here, I met with some of our former colleagues with whom we had shared that this was exactly what we predicted is going to happen. The international community was extremely enchanted by the Taliban's changing narrative, and assumed that they could be controlled through aid in the way the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan was. And we argued that to the Taliban, that kind of legitimacy does not matter. What they care about is the legitimacy in the jihadi world.
But inside 6 to 8 months, they have turned the clock back so quickly on so many different issues. You and Ashraf Ghani left the country that you abandoned Afghans to all of what we're seeing. I just want to play a clip from the former president, what he told the BBC about that actual day. Have a listen to this.
On the morning of that day, I had no inkling that by late afternoon, I will be leaving. Dr. Mohib, the National Security Advisor with the Chief of PPS, came and they said, PPS has collapsed. If I take a stand, they will all be killed. And they were not capable of defending me. And Dr. Mohib was literally terrified. He did not give me more than 2 minutes.
So there it is. You were terrified. You gave the president 2 minutes to decide. You saved yourselves, but you abandoned the Afghan people, didn't you?
Absolutely not. I think there has been a lot of propaganda around that, but we had 3 basic objectives. We did not agree with the situation with what our American counterparts were doing with the Taliban. But on that day, we did not have good options. What we had was bad options, and this was the best. And it saved the president's life. It saved the country, the capital from an infrastructure being destroyed, and it saved the lives of the people that were left. Had the president was extracted from a situation.
That's the first time I've heard running characterized as heroic.
Well, fighting when there was no future for it, and it would have been catastrophic to put more people at danger when there was when the same thing was going to happen in just 2 weeks' time. It was a matter of.
But how much danger? That's the question that people are asking. On that day in the presidential palace where Ashraf Ghani was, how much danger was there? I want to play you another clip. It comes from the chief of staff who was there in the palace that day. Have a listen to this.
I don't know why he ran away. I don't forgive him for that. Because after, I'm again telling you, Liz, after everything was okay, if he had run away when Jalalabad had fall, Parwan had fall, some district around Kabul had fall, there was no agreement between us, could have been understandable. Maybe he said, okay, maybe he was coward, he ran away. He ran away for his life. But after everything, some ceasefire put in place, a security arrangement even in place, that day, the palace was the safest place in Afghanistan. I don't buy that argument there was threat or anything.
I mean, that decision to leave, it had considerable disastrous consequences, didn't it? Because you had Zalmay Khalilzad, the US envoy, saying that he was trying to negotiate with the Taliban not to enter Kabul, and that simply disintegrated the moment it was heard that you had left. Do you think that Ashraf Ghani could have been a Zelensky had he had more courage?
I think it's extremely unfair. One, that Ambassador Khalilzad had been offering solutions and promising that there would be peace in Afghanistan for 3 years. None of it materialized. we knew what he was saying was also not materializing on that last day. There was a plan for a negotiating team to go to Doha. I myself was negotiating that. But on the day when things unraveled at very fast pace, the best thing we could do was to ensure that, one, we save our own city, we save the people that are in that city. Yes, it was disastrous. Many people had to flee, many people had to leave. But imagine if there was street-to-street fighting, those people who actually left would not have been would not have been able to leave either. The situation with the other political leaders who are alive today, because
you don't look at Ukraine and think to yourself, that is how you resist an oppressor.
Because Afghanistan did resist an oppressor. We fought the Soviet Union for 10 years. Zelensky has only been fighting for what, 3 or 4 months now. Afghan people had 1 million casualties against the Soviet Union. We sided with the United States then, and when the war was over and the government was toppled, the US walked away. Once again, we had 70,000 casualties in the war against the Taliban this time. The US decided to negotiate directly with the Taliban. In the end, tried to have Ambassador Khalilzad, tried to have Ashraf Ghani be responsible to give legitimacy to the Taliban. And that is not what Ghani was going to do.
Let me turn to that report I mentioned in the introduction, because you touched upon it, and the interim report, it does blame the US withdrawal, absolutely very clearly. But it also talks of President Ghani being paranoid in the last few months, convinced that the US were going to replace him. And that led him, said the report, to replace military chiefs with his own cronies from the communist era who were loyal to him. And that had a crucial impact in terms of the military's preparedness, ability to actually resist the Taliban. Did you accept that conclusion, that assessment?
The president was not the leader of a political party. He did not have cronies to bring in that would replace others. He had the pool of the talent that was available to him. He did the best.
Why were those generals replaced in those months? The report says he was increasingly paranoid there'd be some sort of move against him.
I don't think there was. I think I read that report, and I know that the people who reported or read those report have their own concerns and have their own opinions, but that was not the fact.
Two final questions. Going forward, how bleak is it in your assessment? The Taliban, as I said, have turned the clock back. How far can the clock go back? Can it go back to when Afghanistan was a safe haven for Al-Qaeda, and all the while in the backdrop you've got this humanitarian crisis?
We warned against this before the collapse, and I am concerned about the rise of extremism and the rise of jihadi groups in Afghanistan. But the Taliban are also digging their own grave by increasing their control over the people. You mentioned it in the beginning of your report: schools, women's scarves. They're doing this on a daily basis that's against the grain of the fundamental grain of the Afghan society, and they will not be able to sustain this for very long.
A final thought then. You've said twice in this interview, and I've heard you say it before, that there's plenty of blame to go around. Many Afghans inside of the country, outside of the country, would like to hear you simply apologise for your part that you played. Will you take this opportunity to very simply say, I am sorry for the bit that I played here?
Absolutely. I did it earlier today with other interviews, and I will say it. I'll look at the camera, and if you don't mind, I'll say it in Pashto and Dari. And I'll say it in Dari too, چیزی که مربوط به ما میشه. ما معذرت با مردم از مردم افغانستان میخوایم و میخوایم که چیزی که اشتباه شده جور کنیم. Of course. Well, I was talking to the Afghan people in this case, because I know it's that anything that is related to my failures, I take full responsibility for and apologize for it. And I hope that everyone involved will be able to come forward and explain what the situation. We owe it to the Afghan people, we owe it to history, we owe it to the partnership and the sacrifices that we have made, that we clear this and learn from it so that we can offer a better future to the Afghan people, for the Afghan people.